Friends, we'll still have some folks who will be joining us, but what we do want to do is invite all of us to just be centered. We have this incredible gathering music, and just want to bring us to that place where we focus our hearts for this time of worship. Please stand as you are able. Friends, we have gathered here with one another before God and in the presence of the completed life of Elizabeth Box Price. For 83 years, she lived and loved among us, and in her life, our lives are blessed. We are here in this hour to give thanks to God for her life. We have gathered to celebrate that life and to honor the gift that her life was, and the gift it will continue to be in memory and in example. We are here to remember, and in remembering to receive the healing which God has already begun in our hearts. And we are here, difficult though it may be, to release her into the eternal mystery whose name is God, the eternal presence who gave her birth, who sustained her throughout the many years of life, and who now embraces her in the time of her death. Therefore, in faith and in trust, let us offer this shared moment and our lives to God. Please remain standing as we sing.
Our first scripture reading today is from Micah 6:8. God has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does God require of you? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And from Romans 14:8, we hear the words, if we live to God. And if we die to God. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are God's.
And from Romans 8, in all things God works for good, together with those who love God and are called according to God's purpose. What then shall we say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? No. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through the one who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor rulers, nor things present nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus.
Dr. Elizabeth Box Price was born June 27, 1941, in Aberdeen, Mississippi, to Grace and Paige Box. The birth of two younger brothers, Paige Jr. and David, would complete her birth family. She grew up surrounded by an extended family of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, to whom she was always sassy. All her life, she carried many happy memories of large family gatherings and with her brothers and cousins of adventures in the woods which surrounded her home. Although marriage and career took her to Oklahoma, she always remembered her deep roots in Mississippi. She attended Aberdeen schools and was graduated from Aberdeen High School in 1959. Having been named valedictorian of her graduating class. Elizabeth attended Millsap College in Jackson, Mississippi, and received her Bachelor's of Arts in Religion in 1963. In 1965, she was graduated cum laude from Perkins School of Theology, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, with a master's degree in Christian education. She completed her formal education when she was awarded her doctorate from Oklahoma State University with a focus on adult learning. While at Perkins, she met her future husband, fellow student John Price, and the two were married on September 5, 1965 in Aberdeen. In 1982, she began her long and distinguished career in higher education as a member of the founding faculty of the Wimberley School of Religion at Oklahoma City University. In 1989, she joined the faculty of Phillips Theological Seminary. She first served as dean of the seminary's Enid campus and later transitioned to teaching, writing, and faculty development after the Enid and Tulsa campuses consolidated in Tulsa. Upon her retirement in 2004, the seminary named her Professor of Christian Education Emerita. Elizabeth felt a deep bond with the whole of creation and was never happier than when she could be outdoors experiencing the wonder and beauty of the entire cosmos, often walking or hiking during the day and stargazing at night. Even as her dementia descended into darkness, she said to John, "There is so much beauty in the world to see." She and John together had visited 23 national parks before her stroke derailed their plans to visit them all. These visits and travels to 4 continents and most of the 50 states deepened her understanding of and appreciation for both the diversity and the unity of all life. Her growing interest in creation-centered spirituality, which unites nature, the cosmos, and humanity, along with the convergence of science, religion, and ways of knowing, inspired her to develop a seminary-level course titled Christian Nurture and the New Cosmology. This course was recognized for excellence by an award from the prestigious Templeton Foundation. Elizabeth was one of a consortium of 6 women seminary professors who received a research grant to examine how congregations implement change around issues of greater inclusiveness and openness, particularly as regards LGBTQ persons and others whom congregations often marginalize. The research was published in 2003 as People of a Compassionate God, Creating Welcoming Congregations. She was also co-editor of an earlier book, By What Authority? A Conversation on Teaching Among United Methodists. Elizabeth was ordained a deacon in the United Methodist Church in 1996. She lived her ordained ministry primarily through her teaching, but also by acting upon her concern for issues of justice, compassion, and mercy. Elizabeth loved music, and her strong soprano voice gifted many church choirs throughout her years. After she and John moved to Georgetown, Texas in 2017, she joined the San Gabriel Chorale, a community performance group dedicated to classical choral works. Elizabeth cherished family and took special delight in her roles as mom, grandmama, and sassy. Elizabeth was preceded in death by her parents, the Reverend Page Box and Grace Jones Box, her brother Page Box Jr., and sister-in-law Mary Anna Harris Price. Among those who hold the gift of her life in memory, gratitude, and love include her husband of 59 years, the Reverend John R. Price, daughter Joy Price, daughter-in-law Brenda Marlin, and their children Alexandra McBurnett, Rachel McBurnett, Madeline Reed, and Elizabeth Reed. Son Jonathan Price and daughter-in-law Sarah Duncan Price, and their children Duncan Price and Anderson Price. Brother David Box and sister-in-law Nell Boren Box, sister-in-law Patricia Ware Call, and her husband Russ Call. Brother-in-law Don Price, sister-in-law Faye Ann Price Presnell, and brother-in-law Glade Presnell, as well as beloved cousins, nieces, nephews, grandnieces, nephews, great-grandnieces, former students, colleagues, neighbors, and friends whose lives she has touched in so many ways. Okay. Dr. Elizabeth Box Price. I started my theological studies at Phillips Theological Seminary in the fall of 1996. At the time, I thought I was pretty cool. At age 46, I was going back to school, and I was driving a blue Honda Del Sol convertible. Now, not everybody did that. At least I thought I was cool until I saw our dean drive up in a red Toyota Camry with a license plate that read, "Sassy." Imagine that. I decided that I was definitely in the right place and that I was not going to be the coolest person on campus. Dr. Elizabeth Box Price, Sassy, was an effective administrator, teacher, and friend. She always had a positive attitude. She was a good listener and supporter. She was innovative and always a feminist. Elizabeth was very community-minded. She developed associations with people and groups from a variety of arenas. With this understanding, I needed more than my own input to talk to you about her life. After seminary, 8 women, 3 from staff, Elizabeth, Mady Fraser, Director of Community Life, and Myrna Jones, Director of Admissions, and 5 seminarians joined together and took the name Wise Women, because we are wise and somewhat sassy. We are now 11 of us, 3 more PTS grads and a spouse, female, of course. From this collective wisdom, I learned that Elizabeth was one of the first ordained deacons in the United Methodist denomination. This was a new order in 1996. It took additional study and examination. She did this while serving as dean of the Tulsa campus of PTS. As dean, Elizabeth tried to broaden teaching to adults with more inclusive language and thought processes. She had the faculty read Women's Ways of Knowing to show them how women learn differently than men. Then she expected the professors to incorporate what they had learned into their teaching. The most important stories I heard about Elizabeth were supporting students and friends. Elizabeth was on the advisory board of Community of Hope, then a United Methodist congregation that was open and affirming. Julie Summers was a Presbyterian gay woman and a student at PTS who was struggling with her denomination. Elizabeth listened to Julie's concerns and told her about Community of Hope. Not only did she make the suggestion that Julie go to Community of Hope for worship, but she went with her, accompanied her to the service. Carol Minter was on staff at University United Methodist, where John was pastoring while she was working on her MDiv. When it came time for her interview for ordination, she didn't pass. Carol, of course, was upset, and her ministry team told her that she should try again next year. Well, when she told Elizabeth said, absolutely not. She encouraged Carol to protest the decision. Then Elizabeth went with Carol to the interview with the whole committee. And because Carol proved her worth and Elizabeth was by her side, Carol was approved for ordination. It was Elizabeth's support and caring that helped many of us get our MDivs and helped us understand our worth as people, women, pastors, and ministers in a variety of walks of life. In 1997, when PTS came together as one campus in Tulsa, Elizabeth lost her position as dean. It went to a man that we respected, but many of us saw Elizabeth being replaced by a younger white male, and we were angry. I still am, if you can't tell. Elizabeth was hurt, and she started teaching from there. The good thing that came out of her teaching was her class on cosmology. She was concerned about climate change, and she loved nature. She took students to the Tallgrass Prairie Reserve. Among other things, they went out at night and viewed the stars and all their wonder. She brought a lot of energy and insight to this class. A couple of years ago, after Elizabeth's stroke, she was still able to join our Wise Women group on Zoom during the pandemic. She kept coming up with ideas for research studies that she thought we ought to do. She was always thinking forward. Elizabeth blessed us with so much of herself. Elizabeth will live on in all of us that she gave so much to, and I'm honored to be one of those that has been blessed by her life.
Hi, everybody. All right, y'all, I'm going to try to get through this, so bear with me. As my amazing Auntie Faye once called me an old softie, and she's right. So, like I said, please bear with me. I'll try to make it through this without breaking down. If you somehow don't know by this point, Mom's lifelong nickname was Sassy. And if you know her family, then you also know that many of those relatives also had nicknames. Sassy, Bubba, Sitter, Brother, Papa, Heap, and my contribution, Jim Jams. I've even had a few nicknames growing up: Chuck, JP, Johnny, Spaz, and Stop Whining, which oddly I only ever heard from my sister Joy. And so I guess it wasn't a surprise when I had my own family and all four of us would end up with at least one nickname. The naming and titling of those most precious to you was a ritual that I grew to love, and for me, it started with Sassy. But Sassy had many other names and titles, some you've already heard. Dr. Price, Elizabeth, Ms. Box, Professor Price, Mrs. Price, the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Box Price. But she was to me for over 51 years just Mom. And it's within that capacity that I have the best perspective on her life that I can give, because I am, in the truest sense, a mama's boy, specifically her boy. And it has been one of the richest gifts of my life. Mom was who I would run to with scraped knees, broken bones, bad days, a broken heart, a powerful problem, an anxious brain, and sometimes seemingly hopeless grief. And she was there to wrap me up in an amazing hug, dry my tears, listen, console, and give me the absolute best back scratches on earth. And whether I was 12 and had wiped out hard on my skateboard, or I was 44 with appendicitis, and all of a sudden she was there in the hallway of the ER, and I was like, "Hey, Sarah, are they actually here, or is this the morphine kicking in?" But you see, Mom needed to make sure I was okay, because I was always her Skimperooski, another nickname. And who else was going to ensure my care and recovery? The doctors? Mom was who was determined to see to my happiness, and even in times of her own exhaustion, even in times of her own sorrow, and even in times of her own terrible trauma. Mom was who taught me to laugh uncontrollably with family, to misbehave just a little from time to time, and to be comfortable enough in my own skin in who I was to be myself, because as she would remind me often, I was a gift from God. And she was the one who taught me that it was okay and important to say, "I love you," as often as you could. Mom was who I learned from the true meanings of resilience, empathy, strength, perseverance, excuse me, commitment, honesty, individualism, and unconditional love. And sometimes, Mom was who missed me terribly as I ventured away from home to carve out my own life, wanting to know as many details as I would share, wanting to know about those who were making a positive impact on my life, hoping I would make good choices, and delighting in watching me rise above mishaps, failures, poor decisions, and sometimes bad circumstance. All the while perhaps not connecting that my capability to do so was rooted firmly in having watched her do the same. And so Mom is an infinite number of things to me. Things that cannot be counted to completion, things I have yet to remember, things I have not yet discovered, and things I will keep between me and her. And I cannot imagine what my life would have been without her nurturing influence and example, guiding me whether I was aware of it or not. And I'm so grateful for that priceless foundation I stand on every day. I can tell you now that I will carry Mom. Sorry, y'all. I will carry Mom forward with me, and I will see her in the trees, and I will see her in the mountains, and I will see her in the stars, and I will see her in my sons. I will hear her in the music, and I will feel her. I will feel her in the wind, and I will feel her with me until I too am ready to meet the cosmos and journey forward. That was the hard part. To close, I'm going to read some lyrics from a couple songs that I'm pretty sure I shared with Mom, and I know they would resonate with the core passions of her life. If I go out in the morning snow, in my pajamas and my winter coat, and take from the house our darker thoughts, and take away the memory of loss, and if I drop them into the snow, will we never find them anymore? In the same field where we have stood, now the snow has covered everything, and I think we will be made clean like the snow. I think we will become new like the snow. Let's get up early now, dive clear into the day. Let's get out of the car with open arms and not wait to be embraced. The flowers that grew, the things that happened since the day you came. Nobody knows, darling. Nobody knows how they are loved. Don't worry, my darling, the sun's coming up. And while I understand the songwriter's nuance in that last stanza, I always 100% knew just how much Mom loved me. Thank you.
Jonathan, that was beautiful. And to let y'all know, I asked to see that beforehand so I wouldn't be a bawling mess right now. And so much of what you said resonated so deeply with me. She was our mom. That's who she was. But I had asked family to send me some memories and thoughts about our mom. And when I was reading through them, some common themes emerged. People spoke of unconditional love, support, acceptance, the importance to her of family, the fundamental importance of family, her kindness, her empathy and understanding, her brilliant mind and intellect, her love of connection to all of nature, from the smallest creature to the vast expanse of the universe, and how she passed it on to her children, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. The many ways she inspired us and taught us to push beyond the way things are to the way things can be, opening up new possibilities in our imaginations. Her embrace of creation-centered spirituality and of the earth, of a grace-filled and welcoming God. I'd like to share a few quotes from some of the reflections I received. There was too much to read all of them here, but I am going to be publishing those somewhere that y'all can read the full text. Sarah and Brenda, her daughters-in-law, both found acceptance and unconditional love with Mom. Sarah said, "When I married Jonathan, I not only gained a husband, but also a mother-in-law that loved me as her own, unconditionally. Her acceptance and love helped fill a void in my life that I was sure could never be healed." And Brenda wrote in a similar vein, When Joy and I married, Elizabeth welcomed me and my children as family. She was everything I wanted in a mother. She was loving, kind, and smart. She accepted me for who I am, even though my own mother did not. When I struggled with this, Elizabeth was always willing to offer sage advice and the best hugs. Her granddaughter Alex said, "Every summer, from ages 8 to 13, I would stay with Grandmama and Granddaddy for a week or two, first in Tahlequah and then later in the house on Big Hollow. One of the things Grandmama would take me to do was horseback riding. She took me to lessons, on trail rides, and even got the stable owner to let me help tack up the horses. One summer, I had so much fun on our yearly horse day trip that I begged her to go again the next day, and then the day after that, and again and again. We went about 5 days in a row, and despite the hour-and-a-half long round trip, she was always happy to take me and never made me feel like I was wasting her time." And granddaughter Rachel told me about a time when she was staying with my parents here in Georgetown. They had cooked up plans to fill the entire weekend. But on the first night, during intermission in a musical, Rachel discovered she had started her first period. Now, if you haven't experienced this yourself, please know that even if you've been educated and know what's happening ahead of time, it can still be a little scary. She texted me in a panic, not sure quite how to tell Grandmama. So I called Mom and I let her know, and she knew just what to do. Plans canceled, ice cream, chocolate, movies, heating pad. And by responding with empathy and compassion, in addition to ice cream and chocolate, Mom made Rachel feel loved, supported, and most importantly, safe. This theme showed up often, especially among the women in the family. Her niece Jane wrote, "Aunt Elizabeth not only accepted us for who and what we were, but celebrated us in all our different aspects. What a truly precious gift she gave us by dedicating time and being truly present for all of us." Another niece, for there are many, Kristen, said, "I think about how normal I felt with her. I loved visiting with her and hearing her stories and the ways she listened to me." Kristen's sister Allison said, "She let me have my own spiritual journey and did not judge me, but rather let me be on my own journey." And her sister-in-law, Fan, wrote, "My memories of Elizabeth encompass those of a sister-in-law who was loving, supportive, faith-driven, and full of grace, mischievous, and yes, sassy." And in the vein of role models, what a role model she was for all of us. Jane wrote, "There's so much more to say about Elizabeth's impact on me and others. How she served as a role model of a professional woman, a feminist, and a famous scholar in a predominantly male field, at least at that time." Allison noted, "When I think about Sassy, what I think about is that she embodied for me the connection to my history, faith, and what is possible. She told me stories about her and my dad's growing up that anchored me to my family and what family could be. She pursued a path in ministry that inspired me and opened up possibilities in my own mind. For me, personally, she modeled all that was possible. When I was somewhere around 5 or 6, I told her that I wanted to be a nurse when I grew up. She asked, "Why don't you want to be a doctor?" In 1970 whatever, that was, there weren't a whole lot of women doctors. So this briefly dumbfounded me. She said that I absolutely could be one if I wanted to. This conversation was the first step that I remember on my path to challenging gender roles and assumptions. When she explained the importance of using inclusive language and inclusive translations of the Bible, and then when she developed the seminary course to explore the creation story in the Bible and the Big Bang theory, that they can both be true at the same time. when she researched and wrote a book on the ways the church could fully welcome and include LGBTQ and other marginalized persons. All of these things showed me how I could and why I should also challenge norms, and that it was okay if it made people uncomfortable. And she was a role model to me in other ways. From her, I learned how to parent, how to unconditionally support and love my kids, and how important it is to be kind and what that looks like, and, as we would say sometimes, how not to judge a book by its cover. Another primary theme that emerged was her love of and the importance of her family. Her roles as daughter, mom, aunt, sister, cousin, and grandmama were very important to her. Again, as Jane said, my Aunt Elizabeth was the rare person who took a genuine and deep interest in each of us at all stages of our lives. Her nephew Mike told me, "I'm going to miss the enthusiastic way Aunt Sassy would always welcome me with a, 'Hey there, sugar,' and a big hug." Granddaughter Maddie says, "Some of my favorite memories of her were at Big Hollow when we would make tea in the mornings and talk, and she let me put way too much sugar in my tea." And the Box cousins of my generation, myself, John David, Jennifer, Jamie, Jonathan, so there are a lot of J's, Allison and Kristen, and well, as at least my children, have all heard the stories of Yo-Yo the cat, Laura the goat, Ruby and Champ the horses, the muffler gift for Christmas, and many more. Both Alex and I remember as children, younger children, to be told the story of Yo-Yo over and over again, and Mom would always tell it, just as fresh and new as the first time. John David remembered, "My first memory would be her telling us nieces and nephews her stories of her childhood and growing up in Aberdeen out in the country. Before we went to sleep in Coffeyville at Grandmama and Granddaddy's, I remember sitting in the front room, and it was just soothing to hear her voice and the way she told the story. I guess it was meant to put me to sleep, but it was always a good story of how she and my dad and her brother and cousins all grew up out in the Coontail area. She was a great storyteller." And along with the unconditional love and support I mentioned earlier, she made me feel safe when I came out to she and my dad in my late 30s. And it was safe, even if it was a little uncomfortable right there at the beginning. I'm so honored and grateful to be her daughter and to have been unconditionally loved, supported, and accepted for who I was. And that's where I finished. Didn't write my nice conclusion. I had no idea how busy this past week would be. But it's very clear that she touched so many of our lives, not just our family, but her friends, all the things and the people in the obituaries, and just made such a difference in the world and in ourselves. So.
I'm going to ask us to stand as you're able for the gospel reading. And in the spirit of who we are celebrating with Elizabeth, this is one that comes from the Inclusive Bible. And so I want you to hear this word from the Gospel of John. In the beginning, there was the Word. The Word was in God's presence, and the Word was God. The Word was present to God from the beginning. Through the Word, all things came into being, and apart from the Word, nothing came into being that has come into being. In the Word was life, and that life was humanity's light, a light that shines in the darkness, a light that the darkness has never overtaken. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. We saw the Word's glory, the favor and position a parent gives an only child, filled with grace, filled with truth. Friends, this is the word of God, the inspired word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. So first, just to acknowledge how much Elizabeth has touched so many of our lives. I do, when we are live streaming the service, I have my phone, so I'm seeing anything that's popping up there. And I've taken screenshots for you, John, because so many people from around the country have logged in and have said who they are and where they're watching from, groups of people who are part of this. And so there's an incredible cloud of witnesses that is here celebrating with us as well. So my story with John and Elizabeth comes into play when they join us in 2017. And when they become part of our church. And it's the same year that we became a reconciling church. And what was really profound about that was that it was after I got to know them, and Elizabeth was when I was trying to make sure that everybody knew all that we had been through and all that we were going through. And Elizabeth let me know that she had been one who was a student of the Reconciling Church movement and knew about that from its earliest days. And so from the 1980s and early 90s, her work on inclusiveness brought her inevitably into this space that we shared here together now. And so the thing also that happened was that John and Elizabeth, upon becoming part of our church, joined what we call our worship planning team. We probably could come up with some sexier name for it, but it's just a team of people that Andy and I developed beginning in about 2014, and we invited people to come and be part of this. After years of relying only on what I know myself, in myself to craft my sermons, I discovered the wisdom and the joy of seeing sermons as being influenced and developed by the collective wisdom of a team, and that team exists today. And when they both had this incredible impact on the worship planning team for those 2 years before she was unable to really join us. So about 2.5 years, I think, John, that y'all were really integrally involved in it. And so one of the things that I count on all my members on our worship planning team to do is to push back and cajole me whenever I'm feeling this sort of tug about where I ought to go, but maybe I'm worried about what happens if I go there and I have these people that just push me into that place. And Elizabeth was one who probably pushed as hard as anybody, maybe harder than anybody. She took that as her personal charge. I recall multiple times when we would be talking about various issues of justice that emerge in the Gospels throughout the Bible. Elizabeth would, in her sweet Southern voice, suggest that I would really be missing the point if I did not talk about environmental justice right in the middle of that. And there was always something that she would draw in, and she would bring us back to that place where we had to talk about environmental justice. And then knowing her story and getting to know her and the stories that y'all have shared that are so much richer than anything that I even knew about her involvement and her work in environmental justice, she consistently tied issues of poverty, hunger, lack of access to clean water, vast migrations, immigration that the world is experiencing, greed, corruption, systemic abuse of so many marginalized people. And she tied that right back to the abuse of our planet and how climate change has been a part of all of that. And she had no problem putting those pieces together because she understood something that was really critical. She was one who helped me tackle the theological perspective on care for the planet and tied it to this incredible theological concept that by I think it was some point in about 2018 that she pushed me to say the word in a sermon, and that word was panentheism. And so it's a word that it scares people because it sounds like pantheism. It's not pantheism. It's not God is all things. It is that God is in all things. It's this notion that the God who created us, who created the world, who set the stars in place, is found in every single part of that. So as Jonathan shared about how he will experience his mother, that's exactly what her life and teaching was about. And so it's something that we have to see, that God is truly in all things. She taught me more about feminism. And one of the things that she and I really connected over was the fact that I told her that when I had done my doctoral work, that I had my theological teeth cut on womanist theology with Dr. Emily Towns, and that was something that Elizabeth constantly pushed me to make sure that as a white, privileged male who is the pastor of this church, that I always made space for the feminine voice. And that's something that we still work on every single week here at this church. So when we discover this spirituality that she had, that was this inclusive, broad, creation-centered spirituality, I hear in her and heard in her so many of the things that I had been learning through Franciscan spirituality. St. Francis saw the image of God in every flower, in every bird, in every animal, every single person. Franciscans believe that when we contemplate by focusing on the created order, we ourselves will hear afresh images that come from St. Francis, Mother Earth, Sister Moon, Brother Sun. That we have those images that are in all part of who we are. And so as we were planning for this service, I had been working, and John and I had had multiple conversations, and Joy and I had had multiple conversations, and John and Joy and I and Jonathan we all had these conversations going about how this was going to come together. And then it was yesterday, I was driving along, and suddenly something just hit me out of the blue, and I realized, so I called John and said, hey, I'm going to tell you about something that just has I don't know how I missed it. But one of the things that for those, and we have a lot of clergy, and we understand we've all done these services, these funeral services, but there's something that we often read at the graveside, which is from John 12. And there's this one phrase that's right in the middle of it that says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. And we often tie that in, we're at the place where we're about to bury a body or in urn ashes or do something. But the thing that really always strikes me about that passage is it's not about death, it's about how we live our lives. And Elizabeth lived her life by folding herself over and over into creation, by folding herself over and over into a deeper spirituality that connected all of us together and connected us to our Creator, to our creation, and never let us let that fall apart. So I see Elizabeth as having this incredible gift of unifying us, of bringing us together, of talking about how if we can see in one another the very image of God, even how we can see in the people that we disagree with sharply the image of God. If we can see all of that, then we can understand a culture that is a created unity, a created whole that comes to us as a gift of God. One of the things that she was proud of was something that also ties in, I think, to this creation spirituality, was that when at the special called session of the jurisdictional conference in 2022, I think that's right, is that right? That the Reverend David Wilson, one of her students, was elected as the first Native American bishop in the United Methodist Church. And that was a gift that she cherished, one of her students, and somebody who had worked with her undoubtedly to keep that connection with the earth going. So I still feel her prodding. I still feel the push, never to let creation spirituality falter, never to let this white male voice silence the feminine voice, to always create space. And for me, her life is a testimony to the power of inclusive language, of how we speak to one another, of how we experience this God of creation, and how we see this Christ, who is, according to John, the gospel writer, was at the beginning and is now and is it for all time. This word that becomes flesh, this Christ that is in all things, this image of God that is cast forever in everything that existed. So, friends, when I remember Elizabeth, I will remember these gifts. I will remember how it is that she called us and challenged us to be the church, this one body, forever abiding in God's grace. We come now remembering Elizabeth, so let us pray. O God, all that you have given us is yours. As you first gave Elizabeth to us, so we now give Elizabeth back to you. Receive Elizabeth into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the glorious company of the saints of light. Amen. Amen. Let's stand as we sing our closing song.
Thank you.
friends, before we share this benediction together, we want to remind you of reception, that you'll have an opportunity to meet with John and the family out in that what we call Brightwell Place, which is the area right outside these doors. Also, for those who may not have seen, there's a table that has some memorabilia there, but there's also a bowl. That is a bowl that was Elizabeth's, and in that bowl are some cards where anybody can write a memory and share that memory there and put that back in the bowl. There are pins there. There's the bowl. There's also the cloth that is I don't think it's a stole, but there's a cloth there that was from when she became a diaconal minister back many years ago. So this is an opportunity for us to share together. And then following our benediction, Jamie and Graham have one last offering that they make. And so we can be departing, but if you wish just to stay in the space to hear that, that's something that we offer to you. So join now in this benediction. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us, as we remember